I'd like to take a moment to share with you what I thought was a solid conversation with a new client. It's my hope that what I shared with her is a help to you the way it was to her. She's 28 years old. She's single. She came to me and said, Doc, I am a student of your work, and I make you one promise that I'm not going to cry. We laughed, and I said, well, we'll see about that. She said, I'm coming to you because I carry an enormous amount of resentment towards my mother. And I realized that as I'm in a serious relationship, I want to make sure that every area of me really heals before I get married and before I have children, so that I don't carry this resentment from one generation to the next. And I really commended her for having that awareness to understand that. I said, what's going on with your mom? She said, well, mom is 56 and she's what I call offensively clueless. I said, what do you mean by that? That's a great term. She said, well, she's so clueless that it's really offensive. She absolutely will not accept or take responsibility or accountability for any of her behavior. She does not own her behavior. She does not own the things that she does wrong to me, that she has done wrong to my father, who's now her ex-husband. She will not own anything at all. And we're not talking about someone who is on drugs or has any other mental challenges as far as I know. She's just a stubborn woman that is very much a her way or no way at all woman. If you don't agree with her, she will excommunicate herself from you. She said there's been periods of time in her young life where her mom has literally gone over a year and not even spoken to her, not talked to her, not called her, anything. I said, over what? She said, because of disagreements. I will call mom out on her behavior. I'll call mom out on her attitude. I'll call mom out on her my way or no way attitude. And she doesn't like it. And this is really bothersome for me. And it's something that I want to deal with because I know I have extreme amounts of resentment towards her. And this cannot be healthy. I said, how would you define resentment? She said, well, resentment is like this anger or bitterness that maybe you have towards a person. I said, well, that's part of it. I said, but let's look at resentment a little bit closer. Resentment is nothing more than unprocessed and unreleased anger. It is anger, but it is anger that we have not processed, and it is anger that we have not released that is trapped where? She said, inside of us. I said, so at the core, what I've discovered, at the core of resentment is really this thing called lost power. She said, what do you mean? I said, this bottled up anger that you have inside of you is really now under the control of someone else. She said, that's startling. I said, and it's specifically under the control of your mom. I said, much like triggers. When people use the word trigger, what they don't realize is they're really using a term that reflects an indication of lost power. Because anytime you say something triggers you, you are sacrificing or giving up your power at the authority of whatever that thing that's triggering you, or specifically the people behind those things, the experiences behind those things that trigger you. I said, and resentment is no different. What makes resentment so bad is that anytime we operate in resentment and we're operating in this loss of power, we are giving up power to the hands of someone who doesn't even have the capacity to recognize or accept their behavior. She completely burst into tears. She was taking notes, avid notes. She put her pen down, took her glasses off, and was literally sobbing on the call. I gave her about 45, 60 seconds to just gather herself. And I said to her, I said, ma'am, capacity matters. I want to talk to you a little bit about capacity, because what makes resentment so powerful is that when resentment is present, it typically is at the hands of someone that we've given power to, who doesn't even have the capacity to recognize or accept their own behavior. Capacity matters because capacity is the measurement of what a person is holding or what a person can handle. She stopped crying. She's writing these things down. And I said, we measure capacity with self-awareness. I said, do you know my definition of self-awareness? She said, I do. It's honesty about who you are, where you are, and what you're doing. I said, ma'am, I created that definition, very simple definition of self-awareness years ago, because people have to understand that at the core of self-awareness is honesty. And when honesty is present and people are honest about who they are, where they are, and what they're doing, self-awareness creates accountability. When self-awareness creates accountability, people increase their capacity. They increase what they're able to hold. They increase what they're able to handle. I said, ma'am, without self-awareness, there can be no accountability. And we're expecting your mom to be accountable when she has limited capacity because she has no self-awareness. She said, wow. She was really giving a lot of feedback, and you could tell she was a deep thinker. Again, a student, she said, of my work. She had her journals in front of me. She was writing profusely on the call. She said, so then, Doc, how can we address this? I said, I'm going to give you a method that I've used for many clients, and you're not going to believe what I'm going to ask you to do. I said, you got to learn how to meet people where they are. She said, that's it? I said, yeah. I said, I need you to meet your mom where she is mentally and emotionally. She said, Doc, I'm really confused. You're telling me my mom doesn't have capacity. She doesn't have self-awareness, and you want me to meet her on that level, right? I said, yeah. She said, Doc, how is that going to work? Like, this makes no sense to me. I said, how old is your mom again? She said, Mom is 56. I said, okay, I want you to treat your mom like a 2-year-old. And what I mean by that is, I want you to treat your mom like a 2-year-old because her behavior and capacity says that she is a 2-year-old. Client started smiling. I said, let me give you an example and an analogy. Let's just say you have a 2-year-old child, and your child is standing in the middle of the floor and has a cup of milk that you've given your child. That child takes that milk, drinks a little bit of it, and just throws it in the floor. Throws it in the floor, the top pops off, and milk goes flying everywhere. I said, what do you think your 2-year-old child's reaction is going to be? She said, probably laughing. I said, why? She said, because the child's 2. I said, more than that. She said, because the child probably doesn't realize it is not a good idea to waste milk on the floor. I said, exactly. I said, so how would you respond then if your 2-year-old threw a cup of milk on the floor? Would you get mad? She said, probably because I'd have to clean it up. I said, no, would you get mad to the point where you're frustrated with her? You put her on 3 weeks punishment at the age of 2. She said, no. I said, why not? She said, Doc, she doesn't have the capacity. My child wouldn't have the capacity to understand. I said, ma'am, why do we get stressed out over an adult who has the capacity of a 2-year-old because they have no self-awareness? She literally then busted out laughing. And she said, Doc, you probably think I'm crazy. I said, no, I don't think you're crazy. I said, what you've done is prove my point. She said, how? I said, when you cried and burst into tears earlier, your tears released the anger, but your laughter released your self-awareness. It was like, she said, Doc, it's like there's a light shining in my face right now. I said, isn't this powerful? Because recognize that when we heal, something happens. With healing and self-awareness is a greater level of expectation, which means you've been on a journey, ma'am. You said you're a student of my work. You've been on a journey to heal yourself in all of those 5 areas, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially. You've been putting in real work to try to work on those areas. And what is happening is that this work is raising your expectations, not just for you, but for the people around you. But we got a big problem. Your mom has the capacity of a 2-year-old, and you are expecting your mom with the capacity or self-awareness of a 2-year-old to act like someone who has the same capacity that you have. And that's not going to work. I said, ma'am, there's a little verse that says, to whom much is given, much is required. I said, have you heard that before? She said, I have. I said, understand this then. This means that when you are dealing with someone who is 56 years old and unfortunately happens to be your mom, and when I say unfortunately, I say that because children don't expect to have to be the parent over their parents. But ma'am, when your parent has the capacity of a 2-year-old, lacks self-awareness, will not be honest about who she is, where she is, what she's doing, then you're going to have to be what in this situation? She said, I'm going to have to be the adult. I said, then that makes your mom what? She said, that makes my mom the child. I said, man, what you don't even realize is that when you put on that frame regarding this situation and regarding your mother, this frame regarding your mother creates a new thought related to how you deal with her. That thought related to how you deal with her takes the anger and the bitterness and it calms it down. In fact, it will eliminate it as long as you focus on the thought. And as you continue to focus on the thought, that's my mom, but she really acts like a 2-year-old. She doesn't have the capacity. She doesn't have the self-awareness. So when she does the things she does, I've got to imagine a 2-year-old who just did what? She said, threw milk on the floor. I said, exactly. I said, is it going to upset you? Yeah. Is it the end of the world? No. She's 2. My client started laughing. I said, but when you plant this new thought, guess what happens? You plant new emotions. And when you plant new emotions, you end up planting new behaviors. I said, ma'am, the easiest way to beat your resentment regarding your mother is to picture your mother and imagine your mother to be not what you hope she was, but to be who she really is. A 2-year-old who throws milk in the floor, who thinks it's funny because she doesn't have what? She said self-awareness. I said, but when you plant the thought that she's just 2, she's acting out, she's having fun, she thinks it's fun, though she's making a mess at 2, she's still 2, she has the capacity of a 2-year-old. Your emotions are going to start to temper down. Those new thoughts are going to create new emotions. Those new emotions are going to create more mature behaviors to help you be able to deal with her. I said, ma'am, this is an easy way to beat resentment. And this is why I believe sometimes resentment is an us problem. Because when we are resentful of people who have poor capacity, then we're treating them like they're adults when they're really what? She said, children. I said, and a child, especially a young child, doesn't have a lot of self-awareness. So you've got to deal with them according to their capacity level so that you can create new emotions. Get rid of that emotion of anger. Those emotions are bitter. You can get rid of those emotions by creating new thoughts about who they really are. Those thoughts create new emotions. Those emotions create new behaviors. And all of a sudden, when you're around your mom or deal with her, you can manage her better because you can process who she is a whole lot better. My client was so very helpful. She's doing amazing. We had 2 sessions since then, and she says that now, even when her mom shows up and is showing off and not taking accountability or ownership, she said, Doc, I find myself picturing a 2-year-old when I see my mom, and I have to catch myself from laughing. Literally, she comes around, and I imagine the example you gave that she just threw a bottle on the floor, and she's laughing, and it spilled everywhere. And I said, that causes you to do what? She says, it causes me to treat her according to who she is and not who I hoped she would be. I said, ma'am, that's the answer to solving this issue of resentment. Sometimes when we deal with people with low capacity, the issue really is not them, especially when it evokes our anger. The issue is really us. I hope this story made sense. If it did, type church in the comments with 3 R's. And then remember, you've got 2 jobs. 1, be better today than what you were yesterday. And 2, don't forget what I told you. What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Zeb. Listen, I've been dying to make this announcement for a very long time now, and I'm pleased to say that Inspire Nation has officially launched. Yes, we finally got a Facebook and YouTube community group where we're going to have exclusive content, exclusive shorts, exclusive discussion prompts, where we're going to engage with other people literally around the world who are on the same healing journey that we're on. I need you to go find these pages right now on Facebook and YouTube. Inspire Nation, follow the page, join the group, introduce yourself, and be prepared to link up with literally thousands of people around the world who are on the same healing journey, who are looking for the same resources, and who want to also be surrounded with other like-minded individuals who are growing in the same direction as you are. I'm so excited about this because it's the beginning of some great things I can't talk about right now. Listen, you got 2 jobs. 1, be better today than what you were yesterday. And 2, don't forget what I told you.